we've been binging this series on Netflix the last little while. It's just outstanding. It's so well done. He's such a polarizing figure, David Beckham. But love him or hate him, I think he's compelling. And just watching that series, it made me kind of warm and fuzzy for that era in football and that era, you know, just culturally as well, I think, the Posh and Becks era. And you guys were right there. That was during your era as footballers. You guys were in England. Dubs, that was in your prime as well, towards the end there.
She's going, what?
That wasn't a joke.
Toward the end there.
It wasn't a joke. No, but you were. But, I mean, for you guys who were in England during that whole kind of era, late 90s, mid-2000s and beyond, did it give you the warm and fuzzies?
It did do a little bit until I saw the free kick that was taken against me with a bang. So then I was reminding of just some bad times I had at Old Trafford, James, actually. So it brought back some bad memories. At the same time, yeah, it did. It was an amazing era. And it was also interesting to see, and I think it's a good idea, it gives everybody a good idea that watches it, what it's like to be a footballer there and the abuse that you can take when things aren't going well from your own fans, from other fans. And he was, David Beckham, on a different level of abuse. I mean, there's a game at West Ham just after the World Cup in '98 where it was just incredible the abuse he took. Nobody deserves to take that. And it was really a shame for a long, long time. And I never realized how much it affected him. It didn't seem like it affected him on the surface, but obviously it did, because in the documentary talks about it quite a bit, Jimmy.
Yeah, and the thing is, too, back then nobody really talked about mental health. And when you did get abuse like that, it was get on with it and just deal with it. And it was very lonely. Everybody looks at football and says, you know, you watch the games on TV and you see the players and you're like, oh, they got some life. But they don't see what goes on behind the scenes and just how difficult and challenging it is. And professional football is definitely a roller coaster. There's so many highs, so many lows. And it does take its toll on you after a while.
They brought him up. It was sort of typical over there, especially in the tabloid newspapers, to build people up. Like, everything's going well. Like, they love David Beckham. He was golden balls, right? And then all of a sudden, when that happened, the World Cup sending off in '98 with Simone, like, which was just crap in my opinion.
Yeah.
They just took that opportunity to just take him, like it was all his fault. And Hoddle didn't help the situation, because he could have, if his comments after the game, if he took the pressure off, because he still had a chance to win the game on penalties, remember. So, yeah, it was an incredible amount of abuse. Incredible.
What about Hoddle? How bad did he come across?
Not great.
Horrible.
Hey?
Wow. Horrible.
No idea.
His own documentary would be a little different, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But it's sad, though, right? I mean, listen, Glenn Hoddle was one of the most silky smooth midfielders I've ever seen.
Short shorts, too, back then.
Very short shorts. Yeah. Had great legs.
Yeah.
I think you have great legs. It's an obligation to have the short shorts, quite honestly.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it was tough, because what a player he was, but he's painted now in the wrong way. And Dubs, as a coach, do you think, you know, we use the Beckham scenario as the example here, but should he have backed his player post-'98, or should the coach be honest and truthful post-match after that kind of, you know, incident?
You can be honest and truthful post-match about your team's performance, but I think it's always wrong to go after an individual. I think he was given an opportunity there to come to his defense, and he should have, whether he believed it or not. And I mean, you know, that sending off, I don't think, you know, was the tipping point in that match that led them to lose it. But going back to what Forrest was saying about how, you know, the England fans and the public built him up, only to tear him down. And it was just the vitriol that was thrown at the Beckhams, but at David Beckham in particular, like him or not. You know, you mentioned how he's a polarizing figure. But what came across to me was, one, that redemption arc. So how much more they liked him after he scored that goal when they clinched, or he scores that equalizer against Greece. Yeah. And then everything that came after that. But it's also, what was my point there about
coaches, managers defending players post-match or targeting players post-match?
Oh yeah, so I mean, it was not only that redemption arc, but I think it was his professionalism that comes through. You know, is like it's called into question. And then to go back to Hoddle, that seed, I mean, obviously the Beckhams are producing it. They're in control of what's getting put out there. But that seed was planted really early with his mom. Remember, he's talking about David Beckham as a really young lad going out to that shop or going out to that soccer store, and Hoddle was meant to show up. And then Beckham was wearing the Hoddle jersey and he doesn't. And then she says later that he was on her hit list, right? I mean, those are pretty cutting words from a mom there. But I mean, whether it was that or whether it was, Ferguson and talking about, the getting in the limelight and then being involved with sponsors and the paparazzi and really loving the fame that came along with being a footballer. Fergie never liked that. And then when he comes over to the Galaxy, and then there's Landon Donovan, and he's calling into question his commitment to the team. But at the end of the day, whether it was Roy Keane talking about him buying a fancy pen and he didn't get it. He understood the clothes, he understood the cards, but he's like, he bought a effing pen. Like, I don't get that. Or it was Landon Donovan, or even Hoddle. Like, I think David Beckham comes out, and again, polarizing figure, but he was a professional through and through. And that's what I got out of this documentary. And I was really impressed with it.
What's the stupidest thing you bought as a footballer? Was there anything that you spent money on that, perhaps looking back, maybe not the most wise thing in the world? Or were you responsible, Jimmy?
I don't know. No, I did buy some stupid things.
Like snakes?
Yeah.
He rented that. That's a rental.
I rented
It was a rental agreement.
I rented that. That went back.
Well, that was one thing when Alex Ferguson was so close to him, but who was grabbing a hold of him? Because, I mean, everything worked out fine for him financially, but he was doing some stupid things as far as that. You shouldn't be spending your money like that. If you had a career-ending injury.
He's got so much money.
Yeah, but what would happen if he had a career-ending injury?
What, signing his name in the new pen?
Right?
It must have been a beautiful pen.
Yeah.
It must be a great pen.
Yeah.
Must have been a
But
beautiful.
Alex
it wasn't
Ferguson,
as
you see, it
shoppy.
was driving him nuts. Even when we played there, I mean, the whole effect of Victoria Beckham was massive, because after that was a game we lost 7 when he scored that free kick. Going to the players' lounge after, I didn't want to, just stayed away from it. But John Moncur, one of our West Ham players, went up there and he was being held back because she had all her entourage, and he's like, Poshhead. She had all her, like, it was just packed. And he's like, he wasn't having it at all. He was like, what does it say up there? Players Lounge. Get her out of here.
This is at Upton Park.
No, this is at Old Trafford.
Old Trafford, sorry.
Oh, yeah. That wouldn't happen. That wouldn't have happened at Upton Park.
Post-match, usually both teams could go up to the Players' Lounge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you guys are being held back.
Yeah.
Really? Because
John
Posh was there.
Posh was in there.
Would you think Fergie would have put his foot down at that point? I mean, I understand, now you hear those kind of stories, you understand why he was concerned about the direction that Beckham's career was going, although it turned out pretty well in the end.
It worked out for him.
But, I mean, that is taking it a bit too far, that sanctity of the room, the Players' Lounge.
Exactly. But for the most part, I mean, it was all good for him in Manchester, and yeah.
Well, the line in the
What a
movie
side.
is as David Beckham is scoring a free kick on Craig Forrest.
In the 7-1 game.
In the 7-1 game, Craig Forrest makes a quick cameo. It's him diving across to his right. Flailing across to his right. and it's great timing, because the quote is from Victoria Beckham. David starts going from a boy to a man. And that's Victoria Posh Spice Beckham. In the documentary, this is what she says. So this leads us to our first mail sack question, if I can find it here.
Wait, first of all, just confirm, though, that so Victoria said that Craig Forrest
That moment.
Beckham from boyhood to manhood.
Yes.
Craig made Beckham a man.
Yeah.
He absolutely did.
Lucky you.
She has a lot to thank me for. Can you imagine how happy she was to see him that night?
So our first mailbag question, mail sack, Wonger's mail sack, I don't know what we call it anymore, is from Bergman, who's been making it. Bergman in the Garage. He's a Hotspur fan. Was Beckham the best free kick taker you faced in the Premier League, Craig?
Yes, he was. Absolutely, no question. There was some other ones that I played with. I think Beckham was number one, and I think John Franco Zola was another one. And playing with him for a short period, and then against him as well, he was one that I feared coming to that, right? But he had others as well. I played with Frank Lampard, who was another one who was very good at free kicks. Never played against him, but free kicks and training. Zola, I remember him. So you have one-offs in the game, and you put the ball down, and but doing one-offs is obviously very difficult. Incredibly hard skill, Jimmy. Guys, we talked about how hard it is. You either have it or you don't. You can work on it. But when you get that eyeing in, and you're just putting guys putting the ball down, and you got an artificial wall, and they're just putting topspin over top of it. It's unbelievable to watch. Like, they can do it just about every single time. The goalkeeper at the time, another Norwegian guy there, Frode Grodes at Chelsea, he bet him like 100 quid. I'll score 3 out of 5 against you over a wall. And it's like, you take that, right? As a goalkeeper, you take
you would
that.
think so.
Yeah,
Of course
he
you
scored
would.
the first 3. He wasn't even close to him. Like, didn't sniff him.
So what was it, though, about Beckham, the way he struck the ball, that was just different than to make him number one?
Yeah, it sounded different when he hit the ball, for sure. And not just his free kicks, direct free kicks from outside the box, but his corners were vicious. And I hated the in-swinging corner anyway at the best of times. And that's obviously right-footed coming from the left side and coming in on goal. And because they were so vicious, and what he had, it was the dip on it. So it was good, obviously, from direct free kicks, but also from a point where even if you're closely marked, if there's a bit of a gap between the defender and whoever's going to head the ball, the defenders, strikers, it'll come down so steeply that you're going to get a head on it. If you watch that in the documentary, a lot of those corners, even the ones where they came back in the Champions League to win, those 2 set pieces, both off corners from him. And he worked on that when he was a kid and over again. But he did have an interesting striking of the ball. It was different, but he had put some dip on it. Frank Lampard could do that too, but more so from a direct striking of a ball as opposed to Beckham coming from the side.
Yeah. There's so many techniques now. It's almost like they lift it, they come under it to get that top spin where it drops down. But then you get a lot of players that strike it almost as a knuckleball now. And
that's
they get
Ronaldo,
it up
isn't it?
And down. Yeah, that's vicious as well because that ball is moving as it comes over top of the wall.
Nothing worse than that for a goalkeeper because if it's moving, you can't react because even if it's like, I hated like a 30, 35-yard shot that was moving because people think, well, it's 35 yards, but you can't react until you don't know where it's going until the ball decides where it's going to go, and that might be inside the 18-yard box before it decides, and so you're trying to pick up the flight, and you just hope you get it right. Or even if it's coming straight at you. I didn't like the ones that came straight at you because you're expected to hold it. If they're just a little bit to the side, you could just go, okay, boom, 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 and just get rid of it.
Yeah.
But here, everybody expected you, certainly back in the day, to catch it.
Is this why you see more goalkeepers now, it seems, more South American style, punching that ball?
Yeah.
As opposed to
Definitely,
trying to grab
because you can see so many times now when players strike the ball, you watch the goalkeeper and you can see the keeper's kind of moving because that ball's shifting left and right. And so now they're just trying to get anything on it.
Yeah.
I think they've lost that ability. I mean, it was really instilled in us, and we worked on it to hold the ball and the importance of holding it on corner kicks and not punching it out and getting a safety. But at the same time, a lot of the South Americans were already doing it, and it was a safety thing, and it seemed to work really well, and they were very, very good at it too. So,
Dubs, so if it's a mechanical thing, right, why don't more players do it? Is it that simple? If you see the way Beckham struck the ball, or Ronaldo, I mean, obviously you do see players now copycat each other to a certain degree, but if it's pure mechanics, why aren't there so many great free kick takers in the game?
Yeah, I'm not sure. And to Forrest's point about goalkeepers, I mean, obviously I was never one. I can't speak to that, but I think the technology of boots, but certainly the ball and how light it is now, I think affects that, and maybe that influences what the goalkeeper's doing. Yeah. But I think it's very much, this is something else they alluded to in the documentary. It was that assistant coach that came in that ended up being, I can't think of his name now, ended up coaching Beckham when he
Carlos Queiroz.
No, it was Capello, wasn't it?
No.
Oh, Queiroz.
Oh.
And he didn't like Beckham. And he talked about how he bulked up in his upper body, and that affected the way that he moved, and it affected his biomechanics on the pitch. So that was interesting to me. So that also influences. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's so many tangents I can go on here, but I'm going to stay on topic. So that's interesting too, the proportions of the player, right? I mean, you look at footballers, I think male or female, you're usually slight, you're not bulked up. You're not like these huge towering players, but I think more and more, and this goes back to development, and I think academies and how you put your investment there so that you see a myriad of players, a myriad of profiles that you're developing. You're not developing one unique profile, and that includes body types. But I think when it comes back to striking the ball, it's very much how balanced you are and how at ease you are to do that. And then on top of that, if your foundation is sound, then you can layer on all that technique, I think, for the better. So if I come back to my playing days, I think of two players who struck it purely. And one was a knuckleballer and with power, and that was Cara Lang. She struck the ball unlike anybody I've ever seen. So she could strike it whether it was 20 yards and she was looking for that dip. She wasn't finessing the ball. She was just trying to rip the cover off of it, and she could get it to dip over the ball, but it was a little bit unpredictable in terms of where it was going, but the goalkeeper would have no chance. But then she could also strike it equally as purely from 30 or 35 yards away. And then when you're talking about more of a finesse where you're bending it over the wall and getting it to dip down, that was Christina Kiss. She was a dead ball specialist. She was a great midfielder. She could spray the ball. She was highly technical, but a dead ball specialist. I don't know if I played with somebody who was on par with her. So on a free kick, you wanted Kiss doing that, or on a corner kick, she was just as deadly.
Jimmy, not to give you too many kudos, but you struck a pretty mean ball with your left, right? Pretty clean. Was there anyone that you based it on, or was it just natural?
No, for me, it was technique. Every day I used to be out just striking the ball. And the only thing you can compare it to is it's a golf swing. Right? In order to control the golf ball, you've got to be out there every day, opening up with a slice and bending it the other way, and those little back
right
spins
foot,
and
left foot.
But I didn't work on my right foot. I just used my left. But every day I was out striking the ball so that I could ping it, I could slice it and bring it in.
That dipping thing, though, is a different thing altogether.
It's completely different.
I watch guys practice for hours and hours. I always practice with them trying to do it too. I could not put the dip on it. East, west, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. That's
well,
fine.
Jimmy, who
north and south? No.
But like, I'm envious of. Who did you go, oh man, I've got to try and do something like? There must have been someone who stood out that you either played with.
Gave up on it.
But there's got to be someone that you tried to emulate, or
no. Like I looked at left-sided players when I was growing up. Like I loved Ryan Giggs. I loved Roberto Carlos. I loved Paolo Maldini. All these guys with great left foots. And just seeing how they play the ball down the lines or inside or pinging, that's what I wanted to work on, my left foot. But my crossing, I was great at crossing, but and I could put that little dip into the box, but trying to get it up and down from 19, 20 yards out, that's a very, very difficult technique, and only a few players can actually really get away with it. And I think if you look now in the Premier League, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, David Beckham, I think, has got 18 goals from free kicks in the Premier League, and I think James Ward-Prowse is on 17, I think, free kicks right now.
At West
and that's another specialist, by the way.
Yeah.
He is fantastic.
By the way, he was a bargain.
Yeah.
He just needs to marry a pop star, doesn't he? Right?
That's
He's
a secret.
A little bit boring.
That's a secret to longevity.
It seems that way, right? Because Beckham and Beckhamania was so much more than just football, right? They really broached into pop culture. Yeah. And, people say that Georgie Best was the first rock star footballer in a very different era. Well, Beckham took that to a brand new level entirely. To the point, Dubs, where, a wise man once told me, his thoughts, my good friend Joe Ross, shout out Joe Ross, by the way, that Beckham was so overrated, he was actually underrated to a certain degree, because he was so much bigger than the sport that his actual footballing ability was almost dismissed at times. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's fair, but it goes back to Forrest's earlier point, sort of griping about his spending, that he should have been spending so willy-nilly and all of these
you brought
things
the pen
that. Up. Yeah, I did.
I don't know if he was griping either. I don't know if it was a gripe.
Was it a gripe?
Yeah. Maybe.
Whinge, maybe.
Yeah.
Whinge, yeah.
That, in a way, was a way for him to invest in his future, because he was making himself bigger than the game. And as much as people had a problem with that early on, it was a way to ensure his longevity in the cultural zeitgeist, not just in the footballing realm. So I think at the time, people had a hard time with it, and it probably did devalue him as a footballer. But before we sort of move on in this discussion, I wanted to go back to the free kicks for a second, because one of my favorite moments from his time at Real Madrid was not only the great interviews that we got with the likes of Ronaldo and Figo and Roberto Carlos, but it was those images of him being on the field with such formidable talent, right? Of the guys that I just mentioned, but great free kick takers themselves. Yeah. So I wanted to know if Jimmy, you ever got into this situation, or you guys can think of other ones as well, where you see Roberto Carlos, who was like so unreal on free kicks himself, lining up behind one with Beckham, and they're kind of having this friendly discussion about who's going to take it. you know? And so I thought that was great because there seemed to be there was a friendliness about it. There didn't seem to be any vitriol. There didn't seem to be any dislike, you know? There was actually one at TFC, was there not? Like a really famous one?
Defoe
it was Defoe and Gilberto.
Yes.
That was amazing.
Brilliant.
It was funny.
Brilliant.
So that's really interesting to me. And then the other one is when I talk to young teams, I always say, sure, develop your game, make yourself as well-rounded as possible, but also find something that makes you special. Find something that makes it impossible for the manager to take you off that team sheet. And so when I go back to Christina Kiss, that was it for her. She maybe wasn't the quickest player, but she was so good at dead balls that her name was almost always on that starting 11 when she was available, because she was crucial to the team in those moments.
Yeah, it's a valid point. Jimmy, you're jumping in there.
No, I was going to say, I mean, for me with set plays, like I knew that if it was 19, 20 yards out, I wasn't hitting it. But as soon as it got to 25, 26, I was thinking, now I'm coming in. Now I want to hit this because I want to go with power.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So you could tell because like as soon as if I started walking over, I knew it was the right distance. So if whoever wanted to bend it, I was like, get out of the way because I'm going to smash this one.
Yeah.
But if it was a little bit closer, they'd be telling me to get out of the way, going, no, leave it. I'm going to put this over.
Yeah.
So did you ever have one of those, no, I'm going to take it versus you're going to take it kind of conversations, but you just kind of went, F it, I'm going to take this ball?
Yeah, only once or twice. It just depends on the distance that you were at, right? Yeah. Where you both kind of know.
Never arguments. I've never seen. I mean,
well, that one, the TFC argument. Who's it?
I was on the bench on that one, and because I was on the coaching staff.
Yeah.
And Defoe and Gilberto are going at it full on, right? And we're all looking at each other on bench, going, "What the hell's going on here?" They've got to figure it out who's going to take this. Because a lot of the times, you don't designate who's going to take it. It's all about the feeling, who's up for it, right? Because if you've got 3 or 4 guys that have got very good technique, some with power, some can bend it over the wall, it's, okay, we'll leave it up to you guys. You guys figure it out. Well, these two were just going toe-to-toe. And they were not letting it go. And I remember we were yelling at other players, like, tell them to sort this now. They've got to sort this out. It's getting embarrassing now. This is ridiculous.
DeCanio and Lampard had the same thing, too. Just one of them.
And then Gilberto ran the
yeah, well, that's the thing. He scored,
and then he scored.
Which is amazing.
That was a young Lampard,
And to be fair to Defoe, he ran over after.
And I saw that. But at the time, neither of them wanted to give the ball up. No. Like, is it Gilberto?
Gilberto,
yeah.
Gilberto, like Gilberto.
Yeah.
He ripped the ball out.
That just sounds like a good footballer, right?
Oh, he can't be bad, can you? No. You want a footballer, name your kid Gilberto.
Yeah, it'll get you trials.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
Craig? No.
I'm sorry, what's his name?
There's a few Craigs, though. Craig Burley, Craig Forrest.
Yeah.
There's a few Craigs. Yeah. What name is the most non-football name out there? Ian?
No, there's a lot of... Ian Hart was a good free ticker.
Ian Hart was very good.
Nigel. No, Nigel Clough.
Yeah, there's a few Nigels, too. We'll have to think about that one.
Nigel Jemson.
Yeah, that's a...
Robert Taylor.
Robert Taylor, yeah.
Taylor.
Who was Robert Taylor? Oh, yeah, Messi arrives, he's world-class suddenly, right? Yeah. No, it's interesting, though. The Galactico thing, I love that. Some of the images from that documentary, though, and you got Beckham over the ball with Roberto Carlos, and there's Luis Figo saying, I didn't have a choice, so I wasn't part of that. Like, this is Luis Figo, who scored some of the greatest free kicks of all time. Yeah. Not getting Zidane's there as well.
Wow.
But yet, the Galacticos didn't really work. I think they got a La Liga at the end there, but they didn't win the Champions League. And that was a real good demonstration, Craig, of how football is so much more than just individuals. Yeah, there's brands, and we know why. We saw, Perez there talking about why he built the Galacticos and why he brought Beckham in, because he had a great right-sided player in Figo. We can triple our revenues. That's why he brought him in. But it's so much more to that than just football, which is what PSG, I think, are now finding out.
Well, it doesn't matter which sport you look at, whoever spends the most. I mean, we go to local Canadian stuff, TFC. I think they spend more money than anybody else in MLS. Where has it got them? The second place team or third place is spending too. Where's LA Galaxy? I think they're up there too. They're not even in the playoffs. Basketball they've got a cap, obviously. NFL has a cap. Hockey didn't used to have a cap, but they do have a cap. But you see the teams that spend lots and lots of money, it doesn't guarantee anything. Look at Chelsea, they spent $1 billion, they can't even score a goal. Well, actually, not even £1 billion. It's crazy. So, it doesn't guarantee you anything. It'll guarantee you eventually you're going to get it right, generally speaking. You know, it's going to give you a contender, but it doesn't always give you a champion, does it, Amy?
No, it doesn't. And CF Montreal is the antithesis to that, right?
That's
and
right.
they get absolutely raked over the coals for it by some of the fan base here. They think, you know, go back to the days, bring in a Drogba, bring in a Nacho Piatti, you know, but that's just not the philosophy of the club right now. And you look at this team, I think on average, they were third in the league this year, like 23.6 years, I think, in terms of the starting 11 and not total roster. But there was one game this year where they were less than 23 in terms of the median age on that pitch. And I think at one point, 6 Quebecers and 7 Canadians as part of that starting 11. So I subscribe certainly to that, or I can back that type of philosophy. I think for development and what it means, and going back to the importance of academies and what's happening in your grassroots and how you're bringing up that talent in your pipeline. But I think there's a balance to be struck, you know, like maybe the answer isn't just spending to spend and bringing in big stars and not really fully knowing how it's all going to come together on the pitch. And then, you know, maybe the homegrown solution and being very reliant on a shoestring budget, maybe that's not entirely the answer either. The answer is probably somewhere in the middle. But I think it's not just buying to buy like you see with Chelsea. I mean, obviously that's not getting them the success, and certainly not at TFC either.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Montreal, I think, is at the bottom of the pay scale. They're quite a bit less than half of what Toronto SC are paying. So, yeah,
they're also not winning championships.
Yeah, that's right.
No, but they're making playoffs, which is important.
Yeah.
Like, if you're TFC, this year is a total failure. And if you're
it's an
CF
outlier.
Montreal...
Generally speaking, though, Wonga, generally speaking, you spend money, you succeed. If you read Soccernomics, which is a fantastic book, by the way, they'll say, there's those outliers, the PSGs, the Real Madrids of the Galactico era. But generally speaking, you spend money, you're going to win championships. Look at Man City.
Yeah, you look at the Premier League and spending, and it's pretty much where the table will lie at the end of it. Well, it does tell you an awful lot about what's going on. Yeah. But what you need is, I mean, look at Toronto SC with their biggest success. Defoe wasn't a success, so they've had some real problems with DPs. But when they were successful, they went for guys that weren't. They were in. You know, Altidore he scored 1 goal, I think, in 70 games in the Premier League. Okay, he's maybe one of the worst there, but he was doing well in the Dutch league. So could he do well in MLS? Absolutely. We'll bring him over, and he's not dead and buried. He's like in his 27, 28 years of age. Bradley, Giovinco, these guys were. You know, Giovinco couldn't get in Juventus. Could he score in there? Forwards do very well in MLS, quality forwards. So right down the backbone of Toronto SC's team, they picked up 3 unbelievable players, and they built around them. Since then, you know, even look at the 2 players they have now, they're not central at anything. So they're playing wide, and Bernadeschi's out on the other side, and it hasn't worked. It hasn't worked. So you have to be really careful about how you build.
The big thing for me, though, is with CF Montreal with the lowest salary, making the playoffs, I would say, is a victory, though. And that is success. Like, what is success, Amy, for CF Montreal with the lowest salary? And we know what failure is. What's success for a team with the lowest salary in the league?
I think it probably is making the playoffs. But when you look at ownership and you look at the sporting director, I think it's the sell-on value of those players. And you look at, you know, Georgi Mihailovic, and they were setting records for his sell-on to AZ Alkmaar, and then Kone going to Watford, Alistair Johnson moving to Celtic. You know, even with their ability to move Miller and send him to Miami. I mean, they picked up a Poku with, I think, was a record at the time, like 1.75, I think, for the club in GAM that they spent on him. And then he's sort of coming into his own. So in terms of measuring success, I think it depends who you're looking at. Is it with respect to the fans? Because that might be a different answer than what ownership is going to give you.
Yeah, precisely. You asked the fan base. Is making the playoffs enough? No.
They got to have. They got to be hope. It's the hope that kills you.
Yeah,
it is. It is.
You know, they honestly, they're making the playoffs, but they got to have some hope and the possibilities of turning it on and winning it. I mean, that's...
Well, in MLS you can. You get in that show.
Exactly.
Right.
18 teams make the playoffs.
Yeah.
It's 18
but does
teams that make it.
Yeah.
What chance do they?
Does that?
They're not winning it. You're not winning the league or the championship, are you?
You never know, Jimmy.
18 teams.
It's not happening.
Let's not talk about playoff structures. Can we please not? I just find it incredibly boring. I'd rather hear Dubs there explain what GAM is than talking about player structures in various leagues.
Was it Gam or Gammon?
I like gammon steak.
Yeah.
It's delicious, actually.
I have to tell you though, look.
General allocation money.
Oh, there's another thing that, because Amy's head is so big on the screen, you've got amazing teeth.
They're beautiful.
Oh my God.
Oh, is your fingernail, is that damaged?
No, I was just showing you my shirt here. See?
Can you stand up to explain pussyfoot? Okay. To move about stealthily or warily like a cat. To avoid committing oneself. A person who pussyfoots.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, good.
I just wanted to tell everybody at One Soccer that it's actually a word. Yeah. Doesn't need to be bleeped out. I didn't want to pussyfoot around the issue.
I appreciate that.
Bleep it out anymore. You might have to blur it out.